This is the most uncle pilled I've ever been in my life. You know, he did a really good job. No notes. Wait.
Presidential candidate, Christie. Governor Christie, great to have you back on the program. I wonder if you could just start by giving me your reaction to the fact that 100 journalists were taken into a room and played unedited raw footage of these terror attacks on October the 7th, because so many people, fueled by social media, are simply refusing to accept.
What is Christie going to say about this, dude?
Look, Piers, I think it's a testimony as to what I've been talking about for the past few weeks. The rise of anti-Semitism, both here in the United States and around the world, is palpable. It's been palpable for some time, and it's increasing. And we need
I hate that they got Cenk
that.
on this. Like, I hate that they got Cenk on this. I'm not gonna lie. Like, Christie's opinion on this matter is so fucking stupid. Okay, like, what the fuck? Fuck Christie. What do you know? Shut up, dumbass. But also, Cenk, on the other hand, also has like incredibly reductive analysis on the situation. He always reduces it to it being a fucking religious war, to which I have spoken to him in private and told him that it is absolutely wrong to say that, because in America, the religious fundamentalist extremists, what do they do? What do they do when their material conditions are better than you know, the material conditions on the ground in a place like fucking Gaza? What do? They go to fucking McDonald's, okay? They do weekend excursions. And then the 3%ers in our country, the religious fundamentalist extremists, they go to fucking McDonald's. Every now and then, there's stochastic terror that occurs. But overall, it's ridiculous to just like reduce this to some kind of religious war. It is not a religious war at all.
Is this proportionate, do you think?
Look, Piers, I think the Israeli Defense Forces and their government should have three priorities here. Priority number one is a retaliatory response against Hamas that severely degrades, if not eliminates, their capability of striking against Israel again. Number two should be getting the hostages out, as many of you as you can, both American and Israeli hostages that are being held now by Hamas. And then third is to try to have the response be seen as something by the rest of the world as setting the stage for conversations with the rest of the Arab world about how this type of conduct doesn't create a peaceful situation. In fact, causes great.
The rest of the Arab world. Why? What about the rest of the Arab world, bitch? What the fuck do you mean? He's like, it's not enough that we've already said all Palestinians are Hamas, but turns out all of the Arab world is Hamas, man. Everyone is Hamas. Notice how the terror designation in that regard, that conflation is deliberate. It's by design, and it helps with America's foreign policy in that region. Have you guys noticed that? That is the whole point. Everyone, dude, the rest of the Arab countries, they also need to fucking get their shit in order. We might start thinking they're Hamas too.
The States with the British and others to the terror attacks on 9/11, who believe that if we don't learn the lessons from what happened there, 20 years of mayhem pretty much coming out of our response, that if Israel does go in with a full-blown ground invasion, then it could lead to a far more serious situation than even the one we have in front of us now.
Well, Piers, look, Israel has an absolute right to protect both its safety and its territorial integrity. And the only way to protect that safety and territorial integrity is to degrade the capability of Hamas to do what they did on October 7th again. And the Israeli Defense Forces are going to have to make the judgment.
Yeah, to degrade Hamas's capabilities of doing October 7 again requires the elimination of the apartheid. That's it. Not continuing to squeeze the Palestinians further and radicalizing them.
You're running for president. Donald Trump is still the front runner.
Fucking so dumb.
Many people think extraordinarily. Given
every single person running for president right now in the United States of America that's like a serious candidate, every single person unconditionally on the Republican primaries, and Joe Brandon, and I guess like RFK Jr. as well. Like, these are all people who have the exact same perspective on Israel and Palestine and how the Israeli government is currently dealing with Palestinians. Every single one. There is a overarching bipartisan consensus on it. Why? Because it's a byproduct of American foreign policy. Because America's foreign policy is the area especially because it makes a lot of money for the military-industrial complex, is an area where there is always bipartisan support. You can always find money in the banana stand for America's weapons. You can always find money in the banana stand for America's incursions in the Middle East and its war on terror and its impact on destabilizing entire regions of the fucking planet. There's always bipartisan consensus there, even under Donald Trump. If you remember, Chris Murphy would talk about how, who is a Connecticut senator, he's a Democrat, he would talk about how, like, Donald Trump is weakening our efforts to do coups in Venezuela. That's a fucking Democrat. Where are the peaceful doves? They would literally criticize Trump and claim that he was an isolationist and how bad that was.
As far as China's concerned, his quote-unquote trade war, this is a guy who said he got the greatest trade agreements ever with China.
He's like talking shit about Donald Trump, but he agrees 100%. It's ridiculous.
Done 25% of what they said they would do and committed to in those trade wars. So the idea that when he calls President Xi brilliant and straight out of central casting, that somehow deterred the Chinese, I think
it's so dumb.
He also called Hezbollah.
By the way, talking about China in this regard, as it pertains to Israel Palestine, is almost as dumb as thinking that, oh, there's Chinese carriers that were pushed towards American positions because China is going to come and defend Palestine. Let me tell you something, okay? If you are completely oblivious to the geopolitical geopolitical conflict and also the history of other nations, not just the United States of America, but other nations and how they view Israel and Palestine, you're probably going to look at that and go, oh my God, China is going to defend Palestine. You are out of your fucking mind, okay? China has been the number one two-state pushers out there. You want to know why? Because they're their number one weapons purchasers. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that, like, the number one weapons purchasers, the second most important trade partner to Israel after America, is going to turn around and fucking go, yeah, we're actually going to defend Gazans. We're going to defend the Palestinians. You are delusional. You are out of your fucking mind if you think that that's going to happen. And you are so unserious. Same with India, okay? If you think India, which is even more laughable, to consider that India is going to protect Palestinians, you're fucking out of your mind.
It's the highest rate of deaths in 2 decades. Many are saying that a lot of this is down to incendiary.
He loves pushing this to show how impartial he is. Like, oh, look at me criticizing Bibi.
They particularly cite Bezalel Smotrich.
In any case, they're part of my government, but they're part of my government, and I decide policy.
But do you distance yourself from comments like that?
There are many comments.
Would he call for the Palestinian town of Awara to be wiped out?
Of course not. That's totally unacceptable. We don't believe in collective punishment. I go after the terrorists. I go after those who support the terrorists, but I don't believe in collective punishment.
Now, many people think what we're seeing now, Governor Christie, is collective punishment, that thousands of completely innocent Palestinians are getting killed as Israel tries to go after Hamas, who, of course, embed themselves amongst the civilian population. Like I said earlier, that number's only going to increase exponentially if there's a ground invasion. It's hard to see this as anything other than an attack on Palestinians in general, because you can't be selective, can you, in the way that is being currently implemented by Israel?
Well, the people who say that, Piers, I think believe that Hamas should be rewarded for being sneaky. Hamas should be rewarded for doing a sneak attack on Israel, killing 1,400 civilians, and then going back and hiding themselves among civilians and thinking that by using them as human shields, they're going to prevent Israel from taking any retaliation. I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. I think Israel has to take the retaliation. And if Hamas decides to embed themselves with civilians, then those civilians' complaint is against the government they elected, not against the state of Israel.
Should Benjamin Netanyahu stay as prime minister? Notwithstanding there's a war now, the vast majority of Israelis in the polls I've seen think he is responsible for what happened. He always said that protecting Israel and defending Israel was his #1 priority. This has been the biggest failure of Israeli defense that we've seen in modern times. Should he remain in office?
Look, that's up to the Israeli parliament. and what they do in terms of a vote of confidence or no confidence in.
Yeah, the irony of people talking about Hamas or people talking about Palestinians and Israelis, the irony, of course, is that Israel has mandatory conscription, so everyone has to serve. So, you know, like everyone, literally everyone over a certain age has like served at a certain point, except for the Orthodox Jewish members of Israel that get a religious exception, and some people that, you know, literally go to jail instead of serving in the military. On top of that, the IDF has literal like headquarters inside of a goddamn mall. But of course, if Hamas had turned around and fucking blew up that headquarters and it killed a shit ton of civilians as a consequence of that, absolutely zero people would say, wow, well, Israel's using human shields. No, they would say this is completely unacceptable. These mass atrocities are completely unacceptable. They're war crimes. Israel should level fucking Gaza. That's what they would say. Okay? Because it's not an issue where you see the humanity of one side. That's it. Okay? That's it. If you don't see the humanity of the Palestinians, it's very easy for you to say, you know, that holy fucking straw man. This is not a straw man at all. This is not a straw man at all. And by the way, I'm not saying it would be adequate or apt or reasonable or justifiable or morally permissible to do that. Okay? I'm not saying that at all. I'm showing you, however, the double standard. As a matter of fact, this is at the heart of my criticism of what Israel has done in Gaza this time around and time again. Okay? It is the untold amount of civilians that they murder that they claim are just simply human shields. This is a ridiculous thing to keep pushing, a ridiculous line to keep pushing. And it doesn't work in the opposite direction. Okay? It doesn't. Why? Because Israelis are our neighbors. Israelis are people that we know. Israelis are closer to us in their existence than the Palestinians are. Palestinians, on the other hand, are Arab, Muslim. We have only seen Palestinians as enemy combatants, not necessarily just Palestinians, but just Arabs and Muslims in general. We have only been trained and conditioned into seeing as enemy combatants for the past 20 fucking years. So automatically, when you see an Arab child, you think, yeah, that's a terrorist. That's a terror baby. That's a terrorist child that is slated to be killed. Of course that's going to happen because that's what we're used to watching on television, okay? You had to manufacture consent for Iraq. You had to manufacture consent for our meddling of affairs in Afghanistan and our occupation in Afghanistan and Iraq in general. And the way to do that is through dehumanization. And it works in the direction of Palestinians as well. So most people don't fucking think about Arabs, especially Muslims, and they're killing Christians too, right? The IDF is killing Christians as well. It doesn't matter. We don't see them as like real human beings. We see them as terrorists. So no amount of untold cruelty that we subject them to is going to meet the same standard that we would apply to Israeli civilians and Israeli citizens in general. This is 100%. This is 100% happening in front of your eyes every single day. And anyone that actually knows Palestinian people or knows Arab people, are Arab themselves, or have friends that are Arab, have family members that are Arab or Muslim, they recognize it because they're like, well, this is my neighbor. This is my friend. This is a human being. And human beings that look like him, that talk like him, that have, you know, the same dreams that we all share, that want to live a life of dignity and respect, are being slaughtered ruthlessly. They're being slaughtered mercilessly, and that's completely fucked up. You can't handwave all of that away by saying Hamas, 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 Hamas. You can try to keep dehumanizing the Arab world, but ultimately people recognize that this is completely unacceptable. Anyway, having said that, let's see what fucking Cenk has to say on Piers Morgan today.
Welcome back to Uncensored, live from New York City. Pro-Palestinian protests since the Hamas terror attacks of October the 7th have highlighted a chasm between progressives and the Jewish community. Marches this weekend faced criticism and police inquiries for pro-Hamas chants and banners.
Oh, you got it. They wrote his last name wrong.
Harvard were accused of anti-Semitism for a public letter claiming Israel was entirely responsible. Climate activist Greta Thunberg posted then deleted a picture pledging unequivocal support for Gaza. It's all led some commentators to ask why progressives and the left seem to stand by all minorities, except it appears Jewish people.
Oh, God. Oh, that's so fucked up. Oh, God. Oh, this is so bad.
Online channel, The Young Turks, a Democratic presidential hopeful. And that's Cenk Uygur. Cenk, great to have you on the program. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I've been following your tweets with interest this week. You've been getting increasingly angry, I think it'd be fair to say. You said, I'm now enormously frustrated by US and Israeli government's barbaric acts in Gaza. I will not be shy in sharing that opinion on Piers Morgan's show today. Why are you so frustrated?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I didn't expect the framing that you put on this segment, and it's framing like that. That's disgusting. So I don't see what this has anything to do with anti-Semitism. I formed Young Turks and TYT with two Jewish friends who are some of my We've known each other and been brothers for over 40 years now. So I think what Hamas did is disgusting. I cry for those Israeli innocent civilians. But do I see you guys crying for Palestinians? I mean, Christie was just on here treating it like it's no big deal because what, Palestinian lives don't matter? I think the real bigotry here is saying that Palestinians, we can kill 3 times as many of them already. And this is the appetizer. Netanyahu and his barbaric government have not even started the entree of murder and death and mayhem they're about to do. And that's somehow okay,
damn,
killing 3 times as many Palestinian civilians, let alone the occupation, which is bigotry by definition. We say that everyone in the world can defend themselves, can have their own state, can have sovereignty, except the Palestinians. And the reasoning behind that is the Palestinians are what? They're what? The idea is that they are savages and that Muslims are too violent and cannot control themselves. So they must be occupied for 56 brutal, disgusting years. So I've had enough of the bigotry against Muslims and Palestinians. And I need you to speak out against that instead of covering every outrageous, atrocious action of the right-wing government of Israel and go, oh, it's anti-Semitism. No, and there is global anti-Semitism. There's anti-Semitism here in this country. 2 synagogues were shot up, Pittsburgh and in Southern California. We fight against that all the time. But then whenever Israel is criticized, people go, oh, no, it's anti-Semitism. No, there's real anti-Semitism.
Okay, Cenk, let
and
me respond.
Instead of attacking that, all you guys ever do is hide behind the veil of anti-Semitism. Do you know why Palestinians might not like Israelis? Because they've been oppressed for 56 straight years.
I hear you. I hear you. And let me respond. I'm not you guys. I don't think I fit into any neat
on this issue at all. He always has to fucking go back to that.
I've actually covered this story, I think, more fairly than most people. I've had many pro-Palestinian voices I've given a huge platform for. They've been getting enormous
every time, dude. Every time my man's got a sidestep. Every time.
I've done that quite deliberately because I think these voices are important to be heard, including yours. I certainly wasn't accusing you, by the way, or your organisation of anti-Semitism. I have found it, as somebody who's always identified as liberal myself, I've found it very dispiriting to see people who call themselves liberals.
Big time lib, dude.
Whose instant response, it seemed to me, to one of the worst terror attacks we've ever seen was to immediately side with the place where these attacks have been launched from. Now, I don't tar all Palestinians with the brush of being Hamas at all. And in fact, the sooner Hamas are out of there, the better for the Palestinian people and the world. But I just think the only human response you can have is, as you did, by the way, to your credit, is it was disgusting what happened on October the 7th. Now, the question then becomes, what is a proportionate response by Israel? Not just to the terror attacks of October the 7th, but obviously there is now a huge ongoing escalation in what has been, as you rightly say, a 56-year war, effectively, in varying degrees over that period. And that's where I think I'm struggling.
He's a coward who hides behind disproportionate response to be like, but they should keep doing ethnic cleansing.
Mass deaths of Palestinian
Get in there, Cenk.
Civilians.
Rip him. Rip his ass. Rip his fucking ass. Call him a baboon in a suit.
I think it will have the opposite effect.
Yes. So let's take it one at a time. First of all, as you rightly point out, on Young Turks, we covered the atrocious actions of Hamas right from the get-go, and we condemned it as fully as anyone can possibly condemn it. Because not only are they killing those poor, innocent Israelis that didn't do anything, those little babies and the grandmothers, it's disgusting what they did. But on top of that, they're ruining the Palestinian cause. They've burned the moral high ground to cinders.
Oh God,
and then
I
on
hate
top
this.
of that, they smear
It's just
all
like
people of Muslim background like myself, and then it unleashes this bigotry of anti-Muslim bigotry throughout the world that I'm sick of. So screw Hamas and their barbarism, okay? Now, in terms of a proper reaction, yes, you need to get those hostages out. So now let's look at I'm going to suggest what to actually do. I'm going to be constructive. But first, let's look at the unconstructive solution that Israel had. Dropping bombs on residential buildings. 50 ambulances have been hit. 10 out of 25 hospitals don't operate anymore. The incubators are about to run out of energy. There's 45 babies that might die today. The parents I just read on CNN are writing the names of the kids on their calves, on their legs, so that if they are killed in a bombing and they're mutilated, they could find their bodies. Imagine writing the name of your child on their legs so that you could find them in the rubble after Israel or any government drops a bomb on them. And I need the West to understand something. Bombs kill people. And do you know how they kill people? They incinerate them alive, or their heads explode. So what happened in Israel was a disaster and disgusting. But you have to be equally honest and equally outraged at the immorality of incinerating babies and grandmothers and aunts and uncles, which is what we're doing right now. America cannot keep sending aid for death and destruction. Enough of the occupation. End it today. End it today. It's monstrous. Okay, I'm going to get to the constructive solution.
I completely understand your passion and your
okay,
anger.
but you don't agree with them. But you don't agree with them.
I, like you, want to see some resolution at the end of this horror that we're witnessing.
Come on, man. Don't when he condemns Hamas.
How do you get rid of Hamas?
No, man. I've condemned Hamas more than he has. Shut the fuck up. That's not what I'm ughing at.
Currently doing it. How do you actually eradicate
the fucking optics argument for the liberal West is so stupid. Shut the fuck up.
Terror group who've quite deliberately, in my estimation,
Hamas really lost its moral high ground? What do you mean?
Such appalling scale that they knew that this
Palestinians are being ethnically cleansed
into this kind of response.
The idea that like you lend any credence to Hamas's actions being like representative of Palestinians is ridiculous.
We don't know the answers to yet, but it seems to me that Israel could, if it's not careful, be being lured into a massive trap here, and I hope that is not the case. But I'm curious, how do you get rid of Hamas if you don't do it the way Israel is currently doing it, albeit with horrific collateral damage in the face of thousands of innocent Palestinians being caught up in the bombing?
Yeah. So let me give you a short-term answer, long-term answer. And a lot of people are not going to like these, but these are realistic ways that you minimize civilian casualties. You do what America did with the Osama bin Laden raid. We didn't go drop a nuke on Pakistan. We didn't go destroy 6,000 residential buildings.
Oh, I don't agree with that.
We sent in special forces.
That's insane.
Is it more dangerous to the special forces?
Did he just say we should do Afghanistan? We should do Afghanistan? What the fuck?
Does it look like Israel's trying to find the hostages? If I have a family member that's a hostage, I'm disgusted by what Netanyahu's doing now. How do you know they're not in the buildings you're dropping bombs on? How do you know they're not in the tunnels you're dropping bombs on? How do you know they're not in the hospitals you're dropping bombs on? So if you want the hostages rescued, every rational human being can agree this is not the way to do it. This is the way to do death and destruction for the sake of death and destruction. It's collective punishment. It's genocide against Palestinians, and the world has to speak out. So my way is
he's talking about the raid in Pakistan. Okay, got it.
Folks dying on both sides. I understand that. Those are super hard choices. But go find Hamas. Go find the hostages.
Okay, he's right.
Go rescue them.
He's right.
Instead of wantingly, indiscriminately, killing after killing. And let's be honest, when you drop a bomb and a kid's head explodes and a grandmother is incinerated, that is terrorism. Killing 3 times as many civilians as Hamas is terrorism.
3 times.
And it's the same if it is done by a government. Send in as many special forces as you got. We should send in whatever you got to actually do the job at hand instead of what Netanyahu is doing, which is to kill these people to what? Send a message. And think about how unrealistic that is. And think about why his method has a 0% chance of working. How are the Palestinians supposed to rise up against Hamas. How would they prove they're against Hamas? Hamas ended all elections. Hamas ended democracy.
That's
so
not
how
true.
are the Palestinians supposed to cry uncle?
He's not right about
They're
that.
already crying uncle.
They've never been able to hold elections without Israel and America's telling them to do so.
More babies killed. That's what his answer is. And it's this. And the United States of America, I'm running for president here. There's no way in the world I would allow this. Sending $105 billion. And it doesn't even go to Israel, Ukraine, or Taiwan. It goes to the defense contractors that bribe these greedy American politicians and then get most of that money. And so the long-term answer is 1967 borders and the biggest walls you've ever seen in your entire life. And no one's allowed to cross to either side. But the Palestinians get their state. It is unconscionable for them not to get their state. And if you're a moral person, of course you believe that the Palestinians are not the only people in the world that cannot govern themselves. If you say that, you are being, by definition, bigoted and a racist. We have to have two-state solution immediately. Immediately. If 56 years of occupation and brutalizing these people is not enough, is 57 years going to be enough? Is 156 years going to be enough? I'm asking Israel, not out of hate, out of love. So many of my friends that I grew up with are Jewish. This is not good for them. This is not good for anybody. Please look into your hearts, look and be the moral people that I know you can be. I've been to Passover dinners where you pray for your oppressors. Now, it breaks my heart, but I got to tell you, you got to pray for those you are oppressing. And to say that you are not oppressing the Palestinians after brutalizing them for 56 long years, you're kidding yourself. And as a friend and an ally, I'm trying to get you to wake up and snap out of this trance. You cannot keep doing this. It is ruining your moral fiber.
Cenk, Uygur, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I greatly appreciate it.
We're on that Uncle Pack, dude.
Your first appearance on this program under these circumstances, but I hope it won't be your last. I think you're an important voice in this, and I do appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much.
I'm Uncle Pilled. I'm Uncle Pilled.
Well, Uncensored next.
This is the most Uncle Pilled I've ever been in my life. You know, he did a really good job. No notes. I would say I misunderstood what he was talking about with Afghanistan. He was just talking about the raid in Pakistan, the Osama bin Laden raid. But overall, I think that there are more productive ways to have that conversation. At the end of the day, if you want to starve out Hamas, which is something I say all the time, if you want to starve out Hamas, you have to go back to a time and reframe your understanding of how to treat Palestinians in a humane way at a time when Hamas was not so popular, at a time when Hamas was actually at 3%, at a time when Hamas wasn't even a militant group that was dedicated to violently resisting against the occupation, and instead was simply just still an Islamist fundamentalist group, but a fucking charity organization, okay? This has happened over the course of the past 30 fucking years, more than 30 years. Ultimately, the way to starve out Hamas and rid it of its power is to ensure that Palestinians have equal rights and equal representation. That's how you starve Hamas. That's how you destroy their stranglehold that they have. The notion that the Palestinians voted for Hamas or whatever is also a silly one, because Palestinians have never been able to have a fucking fair and free election. Even the 2006 election was actually done because the American government wanted them to have this election, even though the members of Fatah openly had stated to the Americans, which they were collaborating with at the time, that this was not the right time to do elections. They were not ready for it yet. And yet America still pushed for it, and then also tried to facilitate a coup, which solidified Hamas's power in Gaza entirely. Okay? So there's never been a serious conversation about what Palestinians want, what Palestinians could get, because there's never really been a democracy. There's never been a real democratic process. You can't have a democracy when you're running an apartheid state. You can't have a democracy when you are under occupation. How can you have a fair and free election when you are not free? That is the question. It's ridiculous. Anyway. The source of Hamas's power is the misery of the Palestinian people at the hands of Israel. Combat that misery and it destroys Hamas's power. Exactly. Exactly. I must say that if you have an open mind, Cenk made his point very easy to understand. I will now pick up my jaw. Yeah, no, he did a great job. I think Cenk, I'm so incredibly Uncle Pilled right now. I've never been more Uncle Pilled than I have in my entire life. What an incredible performance. I'm going to text him right now. I'm going to tell him. Yeah. To be fair, killing one Osama seems more easy than rescuing 200 kidnapped people. Yeah, except it's very obvious that there is no interest in rescuing the 200 people. So much so that Israel, as far as I understand, and I might be wrong on this, but Hamas, by way of Qatar officials, had said that they wanted to release 2 Israeli hostages due to the humanitarian constraints that they currently have. 2 of the hostages are very badly either ill or they were very badly wounded, from what I understand. And Israel said no. They said no. And they still released those hostages to Egypt anyway, today. So the idea that, like, you know, Israel is taking great consideration over the hostages that are in the hands of Hamas is fucking ridiculous. They've openly stated that they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit at all.